Okay, so this is my first impressions video on the Gryphon Apex preamp, Commander preamp and the Apex amplifier. We just uploaded the uncrating video a few days ago, so either Allison or Michael will put the link in the description box. As a matter of fact, a funny thing, after we did our uncrating, I thought, let me go back and rewatch Jay's Audio Lab doing his uncrating video. And I had forgotten, but he had four big guys helping him to uncrate the amplifier and bring it into his room. It was just me and Stefan. Just me and Stephanie, I call him. Me and Stefan, that's it, two of us. You guys are rank amateurs. What the hell? And I was just kidding. Jay, you know I love you. It's just funny. First of all, a couple of things I discovered this morning. Number one, I'm no actor. We were, Mike and I, we had come up with this elaborate idea of how we were going to do this video. And about an hour in, I said, forget it, it's not working. And yeah, all my hopes for an Oscar gone down the tubes. What's the other, what's the other, green Rotten Tomatoes? Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes, yeah, I would have won that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, this is not going to be a rave video like a lot of people would expect, because it's Gryphon, it's top of the line, it costs $170,500 US. It's not going to be a bad review, and don't get me wrong, this is just the first impressions. But I'll go through it and explain some of the things I discovered. The other thing also is that, as I said to Mike this morning, as soon as I saw him, I said, I think I'm going to quit Audiophiles Are Us membership. I'm going to give up my membership to the club. And he said, why? I said, I'll explain, and I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. So first of all, as I mentioned in the video, in the uncrating video, the preamplifier is $67,000 US. The amplifier is $103,500 US. Each of them are two chassis. The preamp is two chassis, the power amplifier is one chassis, unless you buy the monoblock version. All running in pure Class A. One thing about Gryphon, they've always believed in the idea that the amplifier must be pure Class A, must be dual mono, whether it's two separate chassis or one, must be discrete, must have, so in other words, individual parts, not integrated circuits and so on, must be dual mono, must be complementary, must be balanced. There are some very specific philosophy in their design. I have heard many Gryphons over the years. I've owned quite a few and certainly traded in many. When Gryphon had announced this combination 2-3 years ago, I was quite intrigued. And then a very good friend of mine, who's also a client, who lives not far from here, called me up a few months ago out of the blue and said, Adrian, guess what I just bought? And he told me, he said, I just brought it back from my house in the US. I want you to come over and listen to it and see what you think. Now, we had supplied to him, sold him, most of his other parts of the system, including the speakers, and so I know his system very well. As a matter of fact, I know it really, really well. I've mentioned in the past videos that one of the parts of my protocol before I bring in a line is that I want to listen to the products extensively. Oftentimes, before we bring a line in, I will not bring the products into the store because I don't want visiting clients to think that we're carrying the product if we decide not to do it. And so what I'll do is either buy these products new from the manufacturer or from a friendly dealer and then have them brought over to his house. So a lot of times I'll say to the guys, I'm out today. That's where I'm at. I'm at his house auditioning products, listening to it, or just helping him or catching up with him. But that's what I'm doing at his house. So I went over to his house, listened to his system with the Gryphon preamp and amp, and was very impressed with that combination. Spent about an hour and a half there because that particular day I didn't have that much time. And just before I left, he said, look, a very good friend of mine is coming over about a week and a half from now. Why don't you bring your D'Agostino momentum preamp and monoblock amplifiers over, and we'll do a shootout. He wants to buy something, and I told him it's one or the other. This friend of mine has also owned the decks, as a matter of fact still does, owns that combination but in another house, and so I said, yeah, fine, I'll bring it over. So about roughly 2 weeks later, I brought the preamp and the monoblock amps to his house. His friend came over, and we spent about an hour and a half, again 2 hours, listening and comparing. What I can tell you is that the end result is that his friend ended up making a decision for the D'Agostino. So this is actually more than a couple of months ago, but it would have been in the summer. So, but I liked what I heard through the Apex and Commander, that I decided I would pursue it. And then fast forward to about November, I reached out to Gryphon. I said, I'd like to talk to you about Gryphon, and after a couple of months we finally made everything happen, and we just got that shipment in a few days ago. So that's the backstory. We connected everything after we uncrated it and did some quick listening just to make sure everything's okay, and then just before we left that night, I told the guys, look, please connect our speakers that we use for testing, called the Mordaunt Shorts. I can't remember the model. It's an old pair of speakers that I own, and the reason that we use them for testing is that if, let's say, somebody brings something in for repair, we're afraid that it might blow something up, we use these speakers, and this way if the speakers blow up, it's not that big a deal. I was concerned that overnight, if I left the electronics on, if something happened and we lose power, or God forbid, the amplifier goes nuts, I mean, it's got 1 farad of capacitance inside, what would happen to our good speakers? So I said, let's hook these speakers up. And so they did, left it running. I came in the next morning very early, around 3:30, because I was so excited. Imagine I just spent all this money, and I wanted to hear how good they are. Disconnected the Mordaunt Shorts, hooked up the Sonus Faber SE17s, and started to listen. And certainly, first blush, everything was there. Great bass, notes were nice and clear, very good detail, nice imaging, nice sound staging. It didn't do anything wrong. Problem was, there was no magic. And this is where it gets a little bit difficult to explain. You know how there have been times that you've listened to different systems and you just get carried away. You forget within moments that you're listening to a system and you're just responding to the music that's coming out. It could be as simple as a clock radio. It could be in your car. It could be your system, it doesn't matter, or a friend's system, but it just somehow, there's something that it factor, and it doesn't matter what music you play. You could play a whole bunch of music and there's just that magic that happens. Well, it wasn't happening for me that morning, and I was getting more and more frustrated. It didn't matter what I played. I was playing Louis and Ella. I was playing Stevie Ray Vaughan, all kinds of music that I know. I would even play audiophile stuff, which I generally don't play if I'm trying to get involved in the music. And it just wasn't happening for me. I wasn't getting any goosebumps. I mean, a standard, for example, that I always play when I want to get an emotional reaction. I will play Jules Massenet's Meditation from Thais. And usually when I play it, if my mind is not preoccupied, the music would just wash me away. I would get so involved in the music and just completely forget about what's going on. Didn't happen. And I didn't know why. I was so frustrated that time just flew. And the next thing I know, Louis had just come into the store, opened the door to the room, and I snapped at him. I was so frustrated because I couldn't understand why all this money and I wasn't getting what I wanted, what I should be getting. Anyway, I told the guys, leave the system on, maybe it needs more break-in, although the manual says very clearly that the factory breaks in the equipment, but it does need about 40 hours after you reconnect everything and let it settle. So I told the guys, leave everything on, and same thing that night, don't turn it off. And I came back in, checked everything, and I left for the night. Next morning, again, came in. This time I'm dreading now. Instead of being excited, I'm dreading. I opened the door, and literally within seconds, before sitting down, within seconds I knew something was wrong. Didn't sound right. It sounded worse than the night before. And the day before it was sounding good. Just, mechanically and technically everything was good. It was just not very emotionally engaging. Now it was substantially worse. Now again, I'm not saying that it had distortion. I'm not saying that there was anything performance-wise that was wrong. Bass was all there. Soundstage was there. It's just that everything was smaller and less good. Best way I can describe it, it's just less good. It wasn't great. It wasn't as good as even the day before. And now I'm really frustrated. Played Miles Davis, Live Around the World, a cut called Time After Time. It's a cut I know very, very well. Miles Davis is my musical hero. He's a giant among jazz giants. And usually when I play this song, I'm amazed in his 60s. The guy still sounds so good, so incredible. And this time, nothing. I'm just listening to the notes. There's a particular part of the song where he hits A5. And the way that Miles plays in this particular piece is that he'll pepper his notes, and then there'll be periods of silence, and then he'll pepper again, and sometimes it's quite forceful, sometimes it's quite delicate, and then he hits A5, high note, and it's a very soft, very delicate, very sublimely beautiful, just boom, right there. And this time again, I heard it, but didn't do anything for me. Now I'm getting really frustrated. Play all kinds of other pieces of music, nothing's happening, not responding. And within about 2 hours, I stopped. I got so upset. I started thinking, I think when the guys come in, we're going to pack these things up. I'm going to call Gryphon, and I'm going to say, look, I want my money back, or if you won't do that, I'll just sell them. Because I can't, in all good conscience, represent these products. They're not emotional engaging. There's nothing physically wrong sonically. It's just not doing anything for me. And then I thought to myself, listen, we're an industrial unit. Sometimes we'll come in the morning and power's gone out. Internet's gone crazy. Maybe something happened in the wee small hours of the morning. Let me check. So I took the remote control. I walked close to the preamplifier. And the preamplifier I mentioned in the uncrating has a dual function capability. When you are near the screen, it switches to what they call operation mode. And so you see, for example, the inputs, you see the volume, you see mute, and so on. And then when you walk away from the preamp, a few seconds later, it just displays the volume and the input. So it tells you from a distance what's going on. So I walked near the preamplifier, was responding. I looked at all the lights, everything looked fine. I was able to change the volume and so on, it looked fine. I walked over to the amplifier, I looked at the lights, I looked at the LED, everything looks like what it's supposed to be. And then instinctually, I leaned against the amplifier, and suddenly I realized the bloody thing is cool. There's no heat. This thing is supposed to be a Class A amplifier. Class A amplifier is supposed to get hot. Okay, some amplifiers, Class A, not really. At least they get warm. This thing was cool. It's almost as if the amplifier was off. And then it hit me. The night before I left, I had switched the amplifier's bias to L, in other words, low, so that effectively it's not running or putting out very, very little Class A power. So this whole time, this morning, second listening, I was listening to the amplifier in Class AB, or mostly Class AB. And then I realized what an idiot I had been. I had a serious senior moment. I had completely forgotten I'd done that the night before, and I was getting all worked up and frustrated simply because the amplifier wasn't doing what it's designed to do. So I switched the amplifier to M bias, which is medium. At M bias level, it produces up to 100 watts class A, and then the rest becomes class AB. I figured that's fine. I'm not playing it very loud, and 100 watts should be more than enough. And the manual says when you switch levels, give it about 45 minutes to stabilize. So I went back to my office, did some paperwork, did some planning that I needed to do for some work that is upcoming. And then about an hour later, I came back in. And right away, as soon as I walked in, I knew it was completely different. The music that was playing instantly sounded beautiful. And what's interesting is it sounded better than the first night that I listened, which I thought was mechanically and sonically quite good, just didn't have the heart. Well, this time it did. I don't know why. I've been asking myself, could it be my imagination? I don't think so. I've been doing this long enough to know that I'm quite skeptical as by nature. And so I had already been so disappointed that if it just got back to the first time I listened to it seriously, I would have been happy. But this time it was substantially better. So I started playing Miles Davis again. The magic is there. And I don't know how to describe it to you. The sense of relief. Miles is slightly center right. You could hear the audience in the background. And now when he hits A5, oh, that magic, that gloriousness, that beauty comes right back. And then I started playing everything else. I played the Stones. I played Billy Joel's new album, new cut, I should say. Downloaded it, played it. Oh, glorious piece of music. I played Shostakovich number 3. All kinds of music. And didn't matter whether it was a great recording or just an average recording. If it was played with magic, it was there. And I can tell you that this has been one of the most frustrating, one of the most vexing experiences in my audio career. To go from what is a competent sound at L bias to beautiful at the M bias is something I didn't expect. I then switched it to the high bias, which now produces 210 watts class A. Again, left it for about 45 minutes, went and did a bunch of stuff, came back and just to see what it would sound like. And lo and behold, even better. Now this I don't understand. In theory, in M bias, you've got 100 watts of class A power. So if you're playing regular music at regular volume, you should be in the class A envelope. It should sound great. And if you go to high bias and you're playing it at the same volume, shouldn't sound any different. It's still class A, just that you get more of it. And I'm not playing it loud enough that I'm engaging 150, 200 watts. And yet, all I can tell you is that in high bias, it's even more magnificent. It's even more sublime. So, again, this is first impressions. I can only tell you what I've discovered so far. At this moment, I can say that the money appears to be well spent. Is it the best combination in the store that I've ever heard? I can't tell you that yet because I want to compare it to my D'Agostino preamp and amp. Also, now that combination is about, what is it? I wrote it down here. 100 and, sorry about that. Yeah, so that D'Agostino combination is 122,500 US, which is 30% less than the Gryphon combination, or roughly $48,000 less. Also, sometime next week, I'm going to be getting a set of amplifiers, mono blocks, that are about 200,000 US dollars. And after we do that comparison, I'll report back and tell you my honest opinions about what each does. What I can tell you is that the Apex Commander, combination is the best that I've heard from Gryphon. Previous Gryphons have always been very, very, very good, always very musical, always very compelling, but in my experience, almost always a little bit dark sounding. What I mean by dark sounding is that the highs were not as airy and as brilliant sounding as other amplifiers. They always had very, very good bass control, bass dynamics. Soundtakes was always very beautiful. Depth was always very, very good. In other words, certainly among the very best I've ever heard in almost every category. And so without concern, I would recommend Gryphon to people, even though we weren't a dealer. I would have no issue recommending it at all. This combination is certainly many levels higher than anything I've heard in the past from Gryphon. So I'm happy that we are a dealer. To what level? Stay tuned, I'll let you know. Couple of quirks to be aware. So first of all, because it's pure Class A, and when I say pure Class A, I mean pure Class A. It produces a lot of heat, and that's why the amplifier is so big. You need a lot of aluminum to produce this amount of power so that it can dissipate all that heat. And because of that, your room will get hot. So if you live in a country where you have hot summers, make sure that your AC is up to the task, or listen at night. In the winter, you don't have to turn the heat on in that room. You can just leave the amplifier cooking. If you have to install the preamps and the amps into an enclosed cabinet of some sort, you have to make sure you've got good cooling in that cabinet. Otherwise, something will go very, very bad. Number two, be prepared for high electricity bills. I was just saying that to Mike just now. I'm afraid to see what our bill is going to be this month, because if you want to hear this combination at its best, you got to keep it at a high bias. Now, I could be wrong. I could be imagining this. Maybe the folks at Gryphon will watch this video and say, Adrian, you're off your rocker. No, you don't. You just keep it at medium. But even at medium, it produces quite a bit of heat. One thing to be also aware of, at L bias, low bias, the heat sinks, as I said, run pretty cool. When you switch over to the medium bias, the back heat sinks get hot, but the front heat sink remains reasonably warm. Not hot, but the back ones do get hot. At high bias, all the heat sinks get hot. And I tested it in my very scientific manner. I put my hands on all the heat sinks just to see whether or not it got hot and whether or not I could keep my hands on the heat sinks. Even at high, you can keep your hands on the heat sinks, although it gets uncomfortable. It doesn't burn like some other old Class A amplifiers would. Another quirk, I miss having physical buttons and volume knobs on the preamplifier. It's just a personal thing. I own a Tesla. I've owned many, many cars over the years. And while it makes a lot of sense to have a touchscreen for certain things, especially things that you don't have to control on a regular basis, on the things that you do need to control on a regular basis, I still like a physical knob or a button. So for example, on my Tesla, I adjust the volume on a regular basis. Now the steering wheel does have volume, so that's helpful. But when I want to adjust the heat, the temperature, or the fan speed, I have to go over to the screen, find the actual button, and then press it. Now that's not all that great, because it means I have to take my eyes off the road to do that and then touch it, and I'm also left-handed. So because of that, the screen is on the right. My right hand doesn't go where my mind tells it to go. For those of you who are left-handed, you'll know what I mean. And so I'm pressing higher or lower or to the sides of where I need to be pressing, and it's a pain in the butt. A physical button or a volume dial or knob is much easier, and I do miss that. Again, but that's just me. After having used and become acquainted and familiar with the remote control of the D'Agostino preamp, which is a Bluetooth remote, I now hate infrared remotes. With infrared remotes, you have to point the remote at that unit. If you are away from that remote, if your hand is away from it, it doesn't work. So the way we've got the system set up is the preamplifiers on the sidewall and the amplifiers in the front. which means that I have to aim the remote at the preamplifier. I know, this is first world problems, but it's not so much of an issue. It becomes an issue, I should say, if the preamplifier is inside a cabinet or behind a door. Yes, you can work around it. There are ways around it. I know. I'm just saying that with Bluetooth, problem solved. No problems whatsoever. And then last but not least, make sure you have dedicated power lines for the amplifier, and you can splice it for the preamplifier. To get the most out of that amplifier, you ideally want to have 20 amp lines, maybe 2 of them, 1 for each channel, and this way you're not going to be restricting the amplifier from giving you its best. All right, so that's my first impressions of this combination. Overall, happy. I'm at least satisfied that I did not make this huge mistake, and I'm excited again to see what else will happen as we continue to use it and try with different systems and compare it to the D'Agostino. I'm actually very excited to see what that does, because you have 2 giants, 2 wonderful companies, 2 great designers making their best products, and I want to see what that sounds like. Thanks for watching. Comments below if you've heard the Gryphons, if you own the Gryphon, if you've owned D'Agostinos and you chose it because you bought it after you heard the Gryphon, or vice versa. Let me know why. I'm always curious. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming, Doctor. I know you were at the gym when Allison called you. I think I'm depressed. I want to quit my membership to the Audiophiles Are Us Club.
Tell me why.
I just bought this combination of preamp and amplifiers. Cost $170,500 US. From one of the top companies called Gryphon Audio.
Wow, must be a very special system.
It is. It's the most exhilarating and frustrating experience I've ever had. It's also the most vexing in my career. I want to send it all back.
Sounds very serious. Tell me more.
Okay, I forgot.